The air smells wrong before anything else feels different. It is thick with salt from the sea, rotting fish, and something faintly sweet that does not belong. You notice it almost immediately, the way a scent lingers just a second too long in the back of your throat. At first, you might assume it is just another day at the docks. Ships have come and gone for years, bringing spices, cloth, and stories from distant places. The creaking wood, the slap of water against hulls, the shouts of dock workers hauling cargo all feel familiar enough. That is how most disasters begin, not with a clear break from normal, but with something small that feels easy to ignore. It is the autumn of 1347 in the Sicilian port city of Messina. The streets are narrow, packed with stone buildings that trap heat and smells in equal measure. Laundry hangs between windows, fluttering faintly in the morning breeze, and carts rattle over uneven ground as merchants begin their day. You would not think this place is about to change forever. Nothing in the sunlight suggests it. Then someone points toward the harbor. A cluster of ships has arrived overnight, their sails slack, their movement sluggish, as if the vessels themselves are tired. They do not announce themselves with the usual energy. No calls from the deck, no quick movements of sailors preparing to dock. That silence feels strange. You notice it because ports are rarely quiet. As the ships drift closer, details begin to sharpen. The wood is darkened with grime, ropes hang loose, and on the decks, there are figures, but they do not move the way living men usually do. Some lie still. Others shift slowly, unsteadily, as if the effort of standing has become unfamiliar. It is enough to make people pause. Not panic, not yet, just a hesitation that spreads through the crowd like a ripple. Curiosity pulls them closer anyway. It usually does. When the first gangplank drops, the smell hits harder, not just rot but something deeper, heavier. It clings to the air in a way that makes you instinctively want to step back, even if you cannot quite explain why. A few sailors attempt to disembark. Their movements are uneven, their skin pale beneath layers of dirt and sweat. One man stumbles, catches himself, then collapses fully onto the dock. You might expect someone to rush forward. Instead, there is a moment where no one moves at all. Uncertainty can be more powerful than fear, at least in the beginning. Then the questions start. What happened to them? Where did they come from? Is it starvation, sickness, or something worse? No one has an answer, and that lack of clarity is its own kind of danger. By midday, word has spread through Messina. The ships are cursed, some say. Others insist it is a disease brought from the east, carried along the same trade routes that deliver silk and spices. People continue with their routines, but something has shifted beneath the surface. Bakers still knead dough. Blacksmiths still hammer iron. Children still run through the streets. You might even convince yourself that life is continuing as normal. But you would be wrong. Because by the end of the first day, the first local man falls ill. He is a dock worker, strong, accustomed to long hours and heavy lifting. When he returns home, he complains of exhaustion. Nothing unusual in that. Work is hard here. But by nightfall, the fever comes. It rises quickly, pulling heat from deep inside his body until his skin burns to the touch. He shivers despite the warmth, his breath uneven, his thoughts slipping in and out of clarity. If you have ever been truly sick, you recognize the moment when something feels different. Not just discomfort, but a sense that your body is no longer entirely under your control. By morning, he cannot stand. His wife notices the swelling first. Small, dark lumps forming beneath the skin, at the neck, under the arms, along the groin. They are painful to the touch, hard and unnatural. She does not know what they are. There is no word for this yet, no shared understanding to make it less frightening. All she knows is that this is not like other illnesses, and that realization comes too late to matter. The physician is called, a man trained in the balance of humors, in the idea that sickness comes from imbalance within the body. He examines the patient with practiced care, noting the fever, the swellings, the rapid decline. You can imagine him trying to fit what he sees into what he already knows. People do that. They search for familiar patterns, even when none exist. He prescribes what he can: rest, herbal mixtures, perhaps bloodletting, an attempt to restore balance. None of it will work. By the second day, more cases appear. A woman who sold fruit in the market does not open her stall. A child develops a fever so suddenly that his parents cannot explain it. A sailor who helped unload the ships collapses in the street, drawing a small crowd that quickly disperses when his condition becomes clear. At first, it feels like coincidence, a handful of unrelated illnesses in a crowded city. But patterns emerge faster than people are ready to accept. You start to notice how quickly it spreads, not gradually, not over weeks, but within days. Each new case feels closer than the last, as if the illness is moving through the city with intention. That is when unease turns into something heavier. People begin to avoid the docks. Then they begin to avoid each other. Markets thin out. Conversations shorten. A cough, once insignificant, now draws attention in a way it never did before. You might catch yourself stepping back from someone without fully realizing why. Fear does not need to be fully understood to be effective. By the third day, death arrives. It does not come quietly. The first bodies are impossible to ignore. A man is carried through the street, wrapped hastily in cloth, his face barely covered. Those who pass by turn their heads, not out of respect, but discomfort. Death is not new to this world. People are used to it in a distant, accepted way. But this feels different, because it is happening too fast. Families who were whole just days ago are now missing members. Houses grow silent. Doors remain closed longer than usual, and still, no one fully understands what is happening. Rumors fill the gaps where knowledge should be. Some say it is punishment, others whisper of poisoned air, of invisible forces carried on the wind. You might find yourself believing whichever explanation feels least frightening. By the fourth day, the city begins to change. Shops close not out of caution, but because there is no one left to run them. Bread becomes harder to find. Water carriers move more quickly, avoiding lingering conversations. Even the sounds of the city shift. Fewer voices, fewer footsteps, more silence between them. You notice it most in the mornings. The usual rhythm of daily life feels broken, as if something essential has been removed. And beneath it all, the illness continues to spread. Not loudly, not dramatically, but steadily, like a tide that does not recede. By the fifth day, people start to leave. At first, it is those with the means to do so, merchants, minor nobles, anyone with access to a horse or a cart. They pack quickly, taking what they can carry, heading for the countryside. You might think distance will protect them. It is a reasonable assumption. It is also a dangerous one, because some of them are already infected. They carry the sickness with them, not out of malice, but ignorance. And in doing so, they ensure that what began in Messina will not stay there. Back in the city, those who remain face a different reality. Care becomes a risk. To tend to the sick is to expose yourself. To refuse is to abandon them. There's no easy choice. You can imagine the quiet calculations people begin to make. Who to help? Who to avoid? How close is too close? These are not decisions anyone wants to make, but they are made anyway. By the sixth day, fear settles into something more permanent. It is no longer a reaction. It becomes a condition of daily life. People speak less. They watch more. Every interaction carries weight. A handshake, a shared cup, even standing too near someone begins to feel dangerous. You start to understand that the rules you lived by just a week ago no longer apply, and that realization is its own kind of loss, because it means the world you knew is already gone, even if the buildings still stand. By the seventh day, the pattern is undeniable. The sickness has taken hold. It is no longer confined to the docks or a handful of homes. It is everywhere, woven into the fabric of the city. You do not need to see every case to know it is there. You feel it in the empty spaces, in the changed behavior, in the quiet fear that follows you even when nothing is happening. And perhaps that is the most unsettling part, not the illness itself, but the speed at which everything else begins to unravel. Because in just 1 week, Messina has shifted from a place of trade and movement to something else entirely, something uncertain, something fragile, and this is only the beginning. If you were standing there, watching it unfold, you would not yet know the scale of what is coming. But you would sense it in the silence, in the distance between people, in the way ordinary life has already started to slip away. By the end of that first week, the city no longer feels like a place meant for the living. The streets still stand, the stone walls unchanged, but something invisible has taken hold between them. You notice how quickly absence becomes the most visible thing. Doors remain shut longer than they should. Windows stay dark even after sunrise. Familiar faces simply stop appearing. At first, you might tell yourself they are resting, that they will return tomorrow. But tomorrow keeps arriving without them. The bodies begin to accumulate in ways the city is not prepared for. At first, they are carried carefully, wrapped in cloth, given what dignity can be managed. A few prayers are spoken. Names are remembered. That does not last. There are too many now, and not enough hands willing to carry them. The process becomes faster, quieter, less personal. You might notice how people avoid looking too closely. Recognition makes it harder. The smell changes again. It deepens, thickens, settling into the air with a weight that feels almost physical. It clings to clothing, to hair, to the inside of your throat. At some point, you stop reacting to it the way you did before. That is how adaptation works here. Not as a choice, but as a necessity. Inside homes, the atmosphere is worse. The heat of fever, the closeness of bodies, the lack of fresh air. Families gather around the sick, then gradually begin to keep their distance. You can feel the conflict in that space. Care is instinctive. Fear is stronger. A mother might sit beside her child, wiping sweat from his forehead, even as she knows what that closeness could mean. A husband might hesitate at the threshold of his own home, listening before stepping inside. Love does not disappear in moments like this. It becomes complicated. By the 8th and 9th days, though no one is counting in any formal way, time starts to blur. The usual markers of routine lose their meaning. Work stops. Trade slows to almost nothing. Even the church, once a place of gathering, begins to feel uncertain. People still pray, of course. Perhaps more than before. But you might notice a shift in those prayers. Less confidence, more urgency. Faith remains, but it is no longer comfortable. In the streets, movement becomes cautious and deliberate. People keep distance where they can. Conversations happen at the edge of hearing, voices lowered as if the illness itself might be listening. You begin to understand how quickly social rules can change. Things that once felt rude now feel necessary. Avoiding eye contact, stepping away, refusing touch. Survival rewrites etiquette without asking permission. Those in positions of authority struggle to respond. City officials issue orders, some practical, others desperate. Attempts are made to control movement, to isolate the sick, to restore some sense of order. But the illness does not respect authority. It moves through households regardless of status. Wealth slows it, perhaps, but does not stop it. You might see a well-dressed merchant fall ill just as quickly as a laborer. The difference is not immunity, only timing. And timing becomes everything. In some parts of the city, people begin to organize. Neighbors helping neighbors, sharing what little they have, watching for signs of sickness. It is a fragile kind of cooperation, because every act of kindness carries risk. You can imagine the hesitation before knocking on a door, the brief pause before offering help. Courage, in this moment, looks very quiet. Elsewhere, fear pushes people in the opposite direction. Doors are barred. Strangers are turned away. Even familiar faces are treated with suspicion. Trust becomes a limited resource, and once it begins to erode, it is difficult to rebuild. The animals seem to notice something too. Dogs wander without owners. Livestock are left unattended, their routines broken. The usual order of things begins to slip. It is not dramatic. It happens in small, almost forgettable ways. A missed feeding, an open gate, a path left untended. But together, these small disruptions add up. They always do. As the days continue, the speed of the illness remains its most unsettling feature. There is no long period of uncertainty, no slow decline that allows for adjustment. It arrives quickly, peaks quickly, and often ends just as fast. You might speak to someone in the morning and hear of their death by nightfall. That kind of pace changes how people think. Planning becomes almost meaningless. The future shrinks to the next few hours, the next decision, the next breath. It is not that people stop caring about tomorrow. It is that tomorrow feels less certain than it ever has before. In one house, a family shares a meal in silence. Bread passed from hand to hand, water poured carefully into a single cup. You can sense what they are not saying. Every cough is noticed. Every pause feels longer. They are together, but the closeness is fragile. In another part of the city, a man sits alone in a room that was once full. The tools of his trade lie untouched. The chair across from him remains empty. You do not need to be told what has happened there. Absence speaks clearly enough on its own. And still, life does not stop completely. It bends. Some people recover, though no one fully understands why. A fever breaks. Strength returns slowly. These moments stand out, small points of light in an otherwise dark landscape. You might cling to them. Proof that survival is possible, even if it is not guaranteed. But for every recovery, there are many more losses. The balance is not even. It never was. By the time the first week has fully passed, Messina is no longer the city it was. Not just because of the deaths, but because of the change in how people see the world around them. Certainty has been replaced with doubt, routine with caution, familiarity with distance. You can feel it in every interaction, in every decision, in every silence, and perhaps that is the true beginning of the Black Death. Not just the spread of disease, but the quiet reshaping of human behavior. Because once people learn to fear each other, even a little, that knowledge does not disappear easily. It lingers. Long after the first wave has passed, long after the numbers become too large to comprehend, long after the city begins, slowly, to rebuild. If you stand in that space, at the edge of that first week, you are witnessing something more than an outbreak. You are watching a world adjust in real time to a threat it cannot yet understand. And in that uncertainty, something universal reveals itself. Survival is not just about enduring what happens to you. It is about how you change in response to it. The choices you make when there are no good options. The distances you create, and the ones you refuse to. Because in the end, what people carry forward from moments like this is not only loss, it is the memory of how they endured it. And that, more than anything, is what binds their world to yours.